They say the truth will set you free, but nobody warns you that first, it'll destroy everything you thought you knew about your life. My name's Rebecca, and 6 months ago, I was sitting in Dr. David Morrison's office, pouring my heart out about my trust issues and anxiety. Ironic, isn't it? The man I trusted to fix me was simultaneously destroying my family from the inside out. I remember the exact moment everything changed. It was a Tuesday evening, around 7 p.m. I'd left my appointment early because David, that's what he insisted I call him, had a family emergency. I was heading to my car when I saw it. My sister Emma's silver Honda Civic pulling into the parking garage. Now, you might think, so what? Maybe she's seeing a therapist too. And honestly, that's exactly what I thought at first. Emma had been going through a rough divorce, and I'd actually recommended David to her 3 months earlier. Big mistake. Huge. But something felt off. Emma was wearing this red dress, the one she only wore on special occasions. Her hair was done up, makeup perfect. Not exactly therapy attire, you know? I ducked behind a concrete pillar, my heart already racing for reasons I couldn't explain. Call it intuition. Call it paranoia from years of anxiety. Call it whatever you want, but I needed to know. I watched Emma walk toward the elevator, checking her phone and smiling. That smile. God, I knew that smile. It was the same smile she used to have when she was sneaking out to meet her high school boyfriend. Secretive. Excited. Guilty. The elevator doors closed, and I made a decision that would change everything. I followed her. David's office was on the 4th floor. I knew this building like the back of my hand. I'd been coming here every Wednesday for 8 months, working through my issues, learning to trust again after my ex-fiancé cheated on me. The universe really does have a sick sense of humor. I took the stairs, my heels clicking against the concrete, each step feeling heavier than the last. By the time I reached the 4th floor, I was out of breath, but it wasn't from the climb. The hallway was empty. David's office was at the end, and the door was closed. But here's the thing about old buildings in downtown Chicago. The walls are thin, and the doors don't quite seal properly. I heard laughter. Emma's laughter. Then his voice, low and intimate, saying something I couldn't make out. Then silence. My hand was on the door handle before I could think. I should have walked away. I should have left and processed this like a rational adult. But after everything I'd been through, after all the therapy sessions about confronting my fears and not running away from hard truths, I opened that door. The scene that greeted me will be burned into my brain forever. David and Emma on his leather couch. The same couch where I'd cried about my trust issues just hours before. They sprang apart like teenagers caught by their parents. Emma's face went white. Becca, don't. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Don't you dare. David stood up, attempting to fix his shirt, his professional mask slipping back into place. Rebecca, this isn't what it looks like. I actually laughed. It was either that or scream. Really, David? That's what you're going with. The guy with a PhD in psychology, and that's your opening line. What I said next would set everything in motion. But before I tell you that, let me ask you something. Hey everyone, quick question. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I love knowing where my listeners are tuning in from around the world. Okay, back to the story. Emma tried to approach me, her eyes already filling with tears. Becca, please let me explain. How long? I cut her off, my eyes locked on David. He, at least, had the decency to look ashamed. How long has this been going on? 2 months, Emma whispered. 2 months. I did the math in my head. That meant it started just weeks after I'd recommended him to her. While I was sitting in his office, talking about my fear of betrayal, he was planning to betray me in the worst way possible. You know what the really messed up part is? I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. I trusted you, David. After everything I'd been through, I finally started to trust someone again. And you? I turned to Emma. You're my sister. My only sister. We shared a bedroom until we were 16. I was your maid of honor at your wedding. I held you while you cried about your divorce. I know, Emma sobbed. I know, and I'm so sorry, but you don't understand. Don't understand what? That you fell in love. I shook my head. You know what? Maybe I don't understand. But I understand ethics. I understand boundaries. And I definitely understand that this, I gestured between them, is about 6 different kinds of wrong. David finally spoke up, his therapist voice in full effect. Rebecca, I think we should all take a moment to breathe and discuss this rationally. Something inside me snapped. Rationally? You want rational? Okay, let's be rational. You're a licensed therapist who entered into a romantic relationship with your patient's sister. Someone you met through your professional relationship with me. That's an ethical violation at minimum. Some might call it predatory. His face changed then. The mask dropped completely, and I saw something I'd never seen before: fear. It's not like that, he said quickly. Emma isn't my patient. She only came to 2 sessions, and nothing happened until after she stopped seeing me professionally. Oh well, that makes it all better, I said sarcastically. Did you tell her about our sessions, David? Did you use what I told you in confidence to manipulate your way into my family? No, Emma interjected. Becca, it wasn't like that. We just connected. Connected. I tasted the word like poison. You connected with my therapist. The man who knows every vulnerable detail about my life. The man who knows exactly how to hurt me. I pulled out my phone, and David's eyes widened. What are you doing? He asked. What do you think I'm doing? I'm calling Mom and Dad. They deserve to know what their daughter and my trusted therapist have been up to. Becca, no, please. Emma lunged for my phone, but I stepped back. Give me one good reason why I shouldn't. Emma and David exchanged a look, and that's when I knew. There was more to this story. I'm pregnant, Emma blurted out. The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of David's desk to steady myself. You're, what? I'm 10 weeks pregnant, Emma said, tears streaming down her face. With David's baby. We were going to tell you, I swear. We were trying to find the right time. I looked at David, who couldn't meet my eyes. This man, this professional, had gotten my recently divorced sister pregnant while simultaneously treating me for trust issues stemming from betrayal. You can't make this stuff up. The right time, I repeated slowly. When exactly would have been the right time, Emma? At Thanksgiving dinner? Christmas? Or were you just going to wait until the baby was born and hope I didn't notice? David stepped forward. Rebecca, I understand you're angry and you have every right to be. But please think about what you're about to do. If you report this, it won't just affect me. It'll affect Emma and the baby too. And there it was. The manipulation. The same tactics he probably used with his patients, now being used on me. So let me get this straight, I said. You want me to keep quiet about your ethical violations because my sister is having your baby? You want me to just, what? Pretend this is fine? Show up to family dinners and make small talk about baby names? We're not asking you to approve, Emma said quietly. We're just asking you not to destroy David's career. Please, Becca. For me. For your niece or nephew. I looked at both of them, my sister, desperate and pleading, and my therapist trying to hide his fear behind professional composure. And I made a choice that would change all our lives. Okay, I said. The relief on their faces was almost painful to watch. But they shouldn't have relaxed so quickly. Because what I meant by okay wasn't what they thought. If you're loving this story so far, do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this ends. Things are about to get very interesting. Now, let's continue. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove to my best friend Ashley's apartment in Lincoln Park and told her everything over a bottle of wine. Well, she had the wine. I just sat there, numb, replaying the scene over and over. Let me get this straight, Ashley said, refilling her glass. Your therapist, the one you've been seeing for almost a year, is sleeping with Emma? And she's pregnant. 10 weeks pregnant, I confirmed. Jesus, Becca. What are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? I'd told them okay, to buy myself time, but I had no intention of letting this slide. David Morrison had built his career on trust, on ethics, on being the person people turned to when they were most vulnerable. And he'd violated all of that. But Emma was my sister. Pregnant. Vulnerable in her own way. I'm going to destroy him, I said quietly. Ashley nearly choked on her wine. What? Not Emma. I could never hurt Emma, no matter what she's done. But David? He doesn't get to manipulate his way into my family, betray my trust, and walk away without consequences. Over the next few days, I did my research. And let me tell you, the internet is a beautiful thing when you know what to look for. David Morrison wasn't just any therapist. He was the David Morrison, author of 2 best-selling self-help books, frequent guest on morning talk shows, with a thriving private practice that catered to Chicago's elite. His Instagram had over 200,000 followers. He gave TED Talks about building trust in the modern age. The hypocrisy was almost beautiful. I started digging into the ethics codes for therapists in Illinois. Turns out, while Emma technically wasn't his patient, there were still major ethical issues at play. The relationship had begun through his professional connection with me. He'd potentially used information from our sessions. And most importantly, the power dynamic was all wrong. Emma had come to him vulnerable, fresh from a divorce looking for help. But reporting him to the licensing board felt too simple. Too clean. He'd get a slap on the wrist, maybe lose his license, but he'd written those books. He had money saved up. He'd be fine. I needed something bigger. That's when I remembered something David had told me in one of our sessions. He'd been trying to make a point about vulnerability, and he'd shared a story about his own life. He'd said that early in his career, he'd struggled with the ethical boundaries of his profession. He'd made mistakes but had learned from them. At the time, I'd thought it was brave of him to be so honest. Now, I wondered what those mistakes were. I started reaching out to people in the psychology community, casually mentioning that I was considering David as a therapist. You'd be surprised how much people will tell you when they think they're being helpful. One name kept coming up, Dr. Jennifer Hayes. She'd worked with David at a practice in Boston about 8 years ago, before he moved to Chicago and became famous. It took me 3 days to track her down. She was now practicing in Portland, and when I finally got her on the phone, I introduced myself as a journalist writing a piece about ethical practices in therapy. If you're writing about ethics, David Morrison isn't your guy, she said immediately. My heart raced. What do you mean? There was a long pause. Look, I can't give you details because of confidentiality, but let's just say David has a pattern. He left Boston because of a complaint from a patient's family member. Nothing was ever proven, but there was enough smoke that the practice asked him to resign quietly. A pattern. That's what she'd said. David had done this before. I thanked Dr. Hayes and hung up, my mind racing. If I could find the person who'd filed that complaint in Boston, if I could find others, I could build a case that this wasn't a one-time mistake. This was who David Morrison was. But I had to be careful. One wrong move, and he'd know I was coming for him. I decided to play along for a while. I sent Emma a text. Can we talk? I think I overreacted. She called me within 30 seconds. Becca. Really? You mean it? The hope in her voice almost broke me. But I pushed through. I mean, you're my sister, Em. And you're having a baby. I can't just cut you out of my life. She started crying, happy tears this time. Thank you. Thank you so much. I know this is weird, and I know it's going to take time, but I want to meet with both of you. I interrupted. Somewhere neutral. I think we need to talk this through properly. We agreed to meet that Friday at a cafe in Wicker Park. Emma thought it was the beginning of healing. David probably thought he'd dodged a bullet. Neither of them knew what I had planned. Because by Friday, I'd have enough information to burn David Morrison's entire world to the ground. And the beautiful part? He'd never see it coming. Friday came faster than I expected. I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early and chose a table near the back. Quiet enough for privacy, but public enough that David couldn't make a scene. I'd spent every night that week digging deeper. After talking to Dr. Hayes, I'd found 3 more former colleagues of David's from Boston. 2 wouldn't talk to me. But the third, a psychiatrist named Dr. Robert Klein, had been more forthcoming. Morrison was brilliant, he'd told me over the phone. Charismatic, excellent with patients. But he had boundary issues. There was a patient, I never knew her name, but her husband filed a complaint. Alleged that David had gotten inappropriately involved. The board investigated, but the patient refused to cooperate. She said nothing had happened. But you didn't believe her, I'd said. Let's just say the patient filed for divorce 2 months later, and David left Boston shortly after that. Draw your own conclusions. I'd drawn them, all right. And I'd documented everything. Emma arrived first, looking nervous but hopeful. She was showing now, just slightly, and she instinctively touched her stomach as she sat down. You look good, I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, she was glowing. Thanks. She reached for my hand across the table. Becca, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but let's wait for David, I interrupted gently. He arrived 5 minutes later, dressed casually in jeans and a button-down shirt. Without the professional setting, he looked younger, less intimidating. More human. But I couldn't let myself forget what he'd done. Rebecca, he said, sitting down next to Emma. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I think this is really healthy for all of us. I almost laughed at the therapy speak. Old habits die hard. I've been doing a lot of thinking this week. I began. About trust, about family, about what really matters. Emma squeezed my hand. David nodded encouragingly, his therapist face firmly in place. And I realized something important, I continued. Family is everything to me. Emma, you're my sister and I love you. No matter what happens, that won't change. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Oh, Becca. But David. I turned to him, my voice hardening. You're not family. And you don't get to hide behind my sister and her baby to escape the consequences of your actions. His face changed. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and opened a folder I'd created. I'm talking about Boston. I'm talking about the complaint filed against you 8 years ago. I'm talking about the pattern of boundary violations that you've spent your entire career in Chicago trying to bury. The color drained from David's face. Emma looked between us, confused. What's she talking about, David? It's nothing, he said quickly. A misunderstanding from years ago. It was investigated and dismissed. Because the patient you manipulated refused to testify, I said. Just like you're hoping Emma will refuse to see what you really are. Becca, stop, Emma said, pulling her hand away. You said you wanted to talk, to work through this. I do want to work through this, I said. With you. But he's not part of that equation. David stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. Emma, let's go. Sit down, David. My voice was steel. Because if you walk out of here, my next call is to the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. And trust me, I have enough evidence to make sure they take a very close look at your practice. He sat. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my heart pounding but my voice steady. You're going to end your relationship with Emma. You're going to take financial responsibility for the baby. That's non-negotiable, but you're going to do it from a distance. You'll have no relationship with my sister beyond co-parenting. You can't tell us what to do, Emma protested. Becca, I love him. No, Em, I said gently. You're vulnerable, and he took advantage of that. He knows exactly how to manipulate people. It's literally his job. But I'm giving you both a choice. You can do this quietly with dignity, or I can make everything public. The Boston complaint, your relationship with Emma, everything. David's jaw clenched. That's blackmail. No, that's consequences. Something you should be familiar with given your profession. And if I refuse, he asked, then I'll file a complaint with the licensing board detailing how you entered into a romantic relationship with your patient's sister. Someone you met through your professional relationship with me. I'll contact every journalist who's ever interviewed you about your ethics. I'll make sure everyone who bought your books about building trust knows exactly what kind of man you really are. Emma was crying now. Becca, please. You're asking me to give up the father of my baby. I'm asking you to see clearly, I said. He's not who you think he is, Em. And deep down you know that. You know this whole thing is wrong. That's why you hid it from me. That's why you met in his office after hours. That's why you look guilty every time you look at me. She couldn't meet my eyes. David, meanwhile, was calculating. I could see it on his face. He was weighing his options, running through scenarios. Fine, he said finally. I'll end it. I'll support the baby financially, but I'll step back from Emma's life. David, no. Emma started. Emma, he cut her off, his voice suddenly cold. She's right. This was a mistake. I got caught up in the moment, but this isn't sustainable. I have my career to think about. I watched Emma's face as the man she thought she loved chose his career over her in a matter of seconds. And I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because what I hadn't told David yet was that ending things with Emma was just the beginning of what I had planned for him. Emma left the cafe in tears, refusing to speak to either of us. I felt guilty, of course I did, but I knew I'd done the right thing. She'd see it eventually. Or at least, that's what I told myself. David and I sat in silence for a moment after she left. Then he leaned back in his chair, studying me with those analytical eyes I'd once found comforting. You're not done, are you? He asked. What makes you say that? Because I know you, Rebecca. I've spent 8 months listening to you, understanding how you think. You're not the type to stop at half measures. He was right, of course. Which is why what I said next felt so satisfying. You're going to resign from your practice, I said. You're going to cite personal reasons, and you're going to recommend all your current patients to other therapists. Good ones. Not like you. He laughed, actually laughed. And why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'm going to find every person you've ever hurt. Every patient, every colleague, every person whose trust you've violated. And I'm going to make sure they all know they're not alone. That there's a pattern. That David Morrison, the great ethics expert, is actually a predator who uses his position to manipulate vulnerable people. His smile faded. You can't prove any of that. I pulled out a folder from my bag, actual paper, because I wanted him to see how much work I'd put into this. Inside were printed emails, phone call logs, statements from Dr. Hayes and Dr. Klein, and most importantly, a letter from the woman in Boston. It had taken me 6 days to find her. She'd moved to Seattle, remarried, rebuilt her life. And when I called her, explaining who I was and what David had done, she'd been silent for a long time. Then she'd said, "I'll help you." Her name was Victoria, and her statement was devastating. She detailed how David had slowly isolated her from her husband during therapy, how he'd convinced her that her marriage was toxic, how he'd been there for her when she finally left, right into his arms. By the time she realized what had happened, she felt too ashamed to press charges. "She's willing to go on record now," I told David, watching his face pale. "And I found 2 others. Women who were too scared to come forward before, but who will now that they know they're not alone." David grabbed the folder from me, flipping through it frantically. "This, you can't. Where did you get this?" "It doesn't matter where I got it. What matters is what I do with it." "So here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to quietly wind down your practice over the next month. You're going to step away from all your media appearances. You're going to donate the proceeds from your books to organizations that help victims of professional misconduct. And you're going to never, ever practice therapy again." "That's my entire career," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes," I agreed. "It is. Just like you tried to destroy my ability to trust. Just like you took advantage of my sister when she was vulnerable. Just like you did to Victoria and God knows how many others." He sat back, and for the first time, I saw him as he really was, not the confident therapist, not the best-selling author, but a small, scared man who'd finally been caught. "And if I refuse? Then I go public. Today. I've already drafted a Medium post detailing everything. I have journalists interested in the story. I have Victoria and the other women ready to speak. Your choice is simple: disappear quietly or be destroyed publicly." David Morrison sat there for a long moment, his career, his reputation, his entire life balanced on a knife's edge. I could see him running through the options, trying to find a way out, trying to manipulate the situation like he'd manipulated so many others. But there was no way out. Not this time. "Fine," he said finally. "I'll do it. All of it. Smart choice." I stood up, gathering my things. "Oh, and David? You're going to set up a trust fund for Emma's baby. A substantial one. Consider it the price of me not pursuing criminal charges for what you did." "Criminal charges? For what?" "I've been documenting our therapy sessions," I lied smoothly. "Including the parts where you asked about Emma, where you manipulated me into introducing you to her. A good lawyer could make a case for fraud, exploitation, maybe even conspiracy. Want to find out?" His silence was answer enough. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. "You know what the saddest part is, David? You could have been great. You could have actually helped people. But you were too busy using them to build your empire. I hope it was worth it." That was 6 months ago. David kept his word. He closed his practice, citing health reasons. His social media went dark. The book proceeds went to charity. And he set up a trust fund for Emma's baby, my nephew, as it turned out, that will ensure he never wants for anything. Emma didn't speak to me for 3 months. But one day, she showed up at my apartment, 7 months pregnant and crying. "You were right," she said. "About everything. He was using me. The moment things got difficult, he just disappeared. Even with the baby stuff, he does the bare minimum through lawyers." We cried together that day. And slowly, painfully, we started to rebuild our relationship. It's not perfect, I don't know if it ever will be, but she's my sister, and family is worth fighting for. As for me, I found a new therapist. A woman this time, with impeccable credentials and no connection to my personal life whatsoever. I'm working through what happened, processing the betrayal, learning to trust again. It's not easy. Some days I wonder if I went too far, if I was too harsh. But then I think about Victoria, about the other women, about all the people David might have hurt if I'd stayed silent. And I know I did the right thing. So that's my story. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. I post new stories every week. And drop a comment letting me know what you think. Did I go too far, or did David get what he deserved? I read every comment. Until next time, stay safe out there, and remember, trust your gut. It knows more than you think.